Uh, Today is Wednesday the 6th of February 2019 and I have with me Melvyn Roffe, the principal. Now, for some time you always had the moniker the new principal, but that's now, you're past that stage.
At best I'm the nearly new principal,
yes.
But it's gone, I think it's gone even beyond that
and
now.
You've achieved your sort of cruising speed
Yes,
now,
yes.
I hope. Yes. So before we speak about school, Melvyn, tell me a little bit about your background, your early life, your studies.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was born in Derby and spent the first 18 years of my life in that city in the East Midlands of England. Went to local schools, good but unremarkable state schools as they were, and then went off largely on the basis of a very inspirational English teacher to go and study English at the University of York, which I enjoyed a great deal, and got involved in all sorts of things in addition to English, notably politics, and thought that I might then go off and possibly do law or maybe something in the Foreign Office or civil service. But my stepping stone to that was, the plan was to be elected president of the Students' Union. And so a carefully coordinated campaign was launched, which saw me storm into second place by 13 votes, losing to the joke candidate, whose joke was that he pretended to be me.
So you won really.
So in a funny sort of way. It's in a story almost worthy of Robert Louis Stevenson.
Yes.
I both won and lost simultaneously.
Yes.
So I had a very enjoyable time at school and a very enjoyable time at university. And I suppose one of the things I reflect back on my school days was the influence of the headmaster of my secondary school, a man called Glyn John, who was very influential in turning the school that had been a technical grammar school into, I think, a very good example of how comprehensivisation could have worked had it been allowed to do so. And there are many things about the school I went to, although it was nowhere near as remarkable as George Watson College, that are similar, in the sense that there was an expectation that children and young people could develop their talents, whatever they might be. There was a tremendously supportive teaching workforce, a tremendously supportive support staff workforce, great sport, but also a focus on academics as well. And actually, I was one of the less successful members of that year, in the sense that I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge. I only went to York, but there was an expectation that every year a number of would go, even though the catchment area for that school was very varied. So I suppose it taught me the thing that I'm very keen to encourage everyone at Watson to think about, and that's the benefit of being a school that doesn't see any contradiction between being inclusive and being supportive of those who need support, and being really ambitious as well.
I think that's the hallmark of Watson's. Maybe other schools too, and certainly all should aspire.
I think
it definitely is.
I think we do that extremely well. If you had to put your finger on one thing that we do extremely well, then I think it would be that. And that I can absolutely trace that back to my experience of school myself.
That's good. And so then, when you came to the end of university and you had these different options, having failed signal,
I failed. I mean, that was the failed. So essentially, it was What else? This must have been April, May of the year I was graduating, and I had my sort of fallback position was actually to go and train to be a teacher at Durham.
Yes,
but it was, I have to say, my fallback position. And I'd also got an application in for the civil service, and I went to Durham and started not so much the theoretical bit of the teaching course, but actually just getting in and teaching children, and realised I actually quite liked it, seemed to be reasonably good at it. And so there was a point at, I think it was must have been February of the year I was in Durham, when, this shows you how long ago it was, there was a telemessage in my pigeonhole college.
Oh, gosh, remember them.
Which had a message from the headmaster of Anvil School, where I had been for an interview the previous week, saying he was delighted to offer me the job of an English teacher at Anvil School, and a very impressive looking letter in a manila envelope from the Civil Service Selection Board, inviting me to a selection board with potential for appointment to Foreign Office. And so I looked at these two. This was almost sort of like a Thomas Hardy novel.
Yes.
Except if that would have been the case if one of them had somehow been slipped down the back of the pigeonhole and received it. But,
yes.
And it was sort of, well, I didn't think at that point I was done with being a teacher, given that I hadn't actually finished my training.
Yeah.
And the selection board offer, I think, was open for 3 years. I knew I could go back at any point.
Yeah.
So, well, okay, I'll say yes to the job, and if that doesn't go well, then I can always revert to becoming a civil servant or potentially even a diplomat. And a number of years later, then that's
So what was your first job like, and how quickly did you see ways you could develop your career?
Well, it was a very different school to any school I'd experienced before. So I'd say, having been through the comprehensive system, I literally never set foot in a boarding school. I don't think I'd actually ever set foot in an independent school. Possibly, I think I may have been to something at Repton, but so this was a whole new world, and a very serious boarding school, academic. But just a complete life, and I seemed to do pretty well, and it was quite soon after I joined, and it was about the time, so it must have been probably a year, 18 months in, when I was sort of thinking, okay, if I'm going to make if I don't want to do this for a long period of time, then there's a point coming up when I'm going to have to make that call and return the form to selection board and go for that. When the headmaster of Anvil, who had been at both Fettes and Loretto, David McMurray, said, sort of one of his off-the-cuff, unguarded, but actually obviously very deliberate conversations he tended to have with me. So you obviously want to be a headmaster. How do you intend doing that? Do you want to be a housemaster, or do you want to be a head of department?
Oh yes, the two different ways.
So that was the sort of choice that was it was being presented as a choice, but actually what it was don't
go for it.
Go for it. Don't sell yourself short. So that was both flattering and slightly bewildering at that point. And so the decision was taken, I suppose, almost by default, but not really. It was more deliberate than that. That I would stick with teaching and would seek a career in teaching in the fullness of time. In the meantime, I had a further crack at my spectacularly unsuccessful political career, because one defeat was not sufficient. So I'd become a local councillor, which was quite. I think I was the first member of the Anvil School. I know I was the first member of the Anvil School Common Room to be elected to the local council. I'd become, believe it or not, the town mayor of Anvil for a short period of time. An election I did win, and indeed I stood in the general election in 1992. And so, in effect, the more interesting discussion I then had with my Catherine, my then wife, was, okay, there is actually another option here, which is to develop the political career and see what happens, and possibly move to somewhere that might actually possibly think about electing you. And a number of people I was with at that time in the sort of cohort of new candidates in 92 then went on to be elected in 97, and a number of them then went on to become junior ministers in the
Do you ever have any regrets?
No, because I know
that could have been me.
No, I did for a while, but frankly, I saw what Westminster did to some of them.
Yeah.
And one in particular, who is now dead, who's my age, who was elected, and the lifestyle ruined his marriage and ultimately killed him. So no, I have no compunction whatsoever to saying actually that was a good choice to make.
And so you moved on from Oundle.
So then on the basis that I then
promotions.
Yeah, but the basis of the answer to David Murray's question was actually I am interested in my subject. I think probably the leadership of a department in a significant school would be the next thing.
Yes.
So I was then appointed to be the head of English at Monmouth School. So that was my first foray outside England.
Yes.
And did that for 4 years as head of English, and then I was appointed internally to be the academic deputy.
Yes.
So that was the next step up.
And you enjoyed these new challenges?
Yeah, I mean, it was the challenge was each challenge was great, and I thought it was a really good department of individuals very committed to teaching, very committed to their subject. Yeah. Some fantastic pupils. Some not so, but mostly fantastic pupils, and a lovely part of the world. And I was very again pleased and flattered to have it suggested to me that I should apply for the deputy headship when it came up, and director of studies as it was called.
And that gave you a wider,
and that gave me a much wider
curriculum.
And it was a time when, as is often the case, when schools were looking at curriculum issues very forensically, asking what we were trying to do with the curriculum and how we could make the curriculum work for what was a slightly changing cohort of boys in the school. We were starting to teach collaboratively with the girls' school up the road, so that had its opportunities and its challenges. And when the other deputy went on secondment for a term, I was effectively the sole deputy for basically 6 months. So that was quite a baptism by fire in my early 30s to help run the school at that sort of level. And
the move that came after that, was that?
So then again,
first headship?
So the first headship. So I had vaguely heard of the school called Old Swinford Hospital, and mainly because I remember my fourth form boys came into the class on a Saturday morning and said, "We're playing Old Swinford Hospital this afternoon, and I don't think it's fair that we're playing sick boys." So there was a little conversation about the use of the word hospital, as it was in George Watson's hospital, in the 18th century, that didn't necessarily indicate anything to do with health or lack of it. And so when that job came up, and I thought, well, I'm probably going to want to be ahead at some point, not too distant future. So let's throw my hat into this particular ring. And it was attractive to me that it was a school which, although it was a very serious boarding school, was actually a school in the state sector. So I thought, well, here's a bit of a challenge. How do you do that? How do you run a school which looks and feels like an independent school but actually exists within the state sector in England? And so I applied, and I was subsequently told that my application arrived late. And so that's but so impressed with the governors by it. Well, at least that's what they said. It may have just been there were no other applicants, that they allowed it to go forward and ultimately appointed me. So I had 6 very, very good years at Old Swinford. So we did a number of interesting things. Me and my new teams, I had to appoint a new deputy as well, and that was that. So we managed to increase the size of the school. So it was a school of 550, which really was too small to sustain the curriculum that we wanted to deliver. It was boys only, and the obvious thing to do was to have girls admitted at least in the 6th form, which we did. And that also brought me back into the political sphere, because it became so that was 2001, so the new Labour government was just starting its 2nd term, and there was a lot of focus on boarding schools and their role in providing more positive outcomes for children from disadvantaged backgrounds, particularly children in care. So I spent a lot of time up and down to London liaising with various two secretaries of state and a number of schools ministers, and persuading them that one way of doing it was to give the state boarding sector in general and Alstonford Hospital School in particular a great deal of public money, which they dutifully obliged, and £12 million came our way to develop the school infrastructure and put it on a more an even scale for the future, and that was pretty successful. 6 years was probably enough in that job, and so when the opportunity came to move to Norfolk, to the largest of the state boarding schools, Wyndham College. So it was a summer where I was moving away from one expansion project funded by government into another expansion project, and much bigger scale. So that was moving from 1,250 up to 1,370, 80. And brand new boarding house being built, so there's lots of excitement going on there. And what I really wanted to do was to get back to full co-education. And that was so I was interested in the scale of that operation, but also the fact that it was a fully co-educational school.
So how long were you at Wyndham for?
So that was 7 years at Wyndham, which was very, very good. And both my son and daughter went through school at the same time, and I think that went all right. Well, as our daughter says, it's too early to tell.
I'll let you know in 30 years.
Yeah, showing mind the French Revolution. So that was very a different sort of challenge. Very different landscape, of course, from the urban West Midlands, but after 13 years running two very different schools in the state sector, I thought it was probably time to look back at going back into the independent sector.
And then you saw the advert for.
Well, actually, Catherine and I had a conversation about where. Given that we were living in the middle of a field in Norfolk, literally the school was in the middle of a field, where would we like to live next? Would it be possibly in a place which had pavements? Maybe more buses than 1 week? But there are not that many cities that we could see ourselves living in. And it was very soon after that conversation that the phone went, and it was the recruitment consultants looking for the next principal of George Watson's College. So it was sort of, that might be interesting. And of course I'd heard of Watson's and been to Edinburgh any number of times, and so the attraction of both the school and the city was too good to miss, even though I had to say that I was somewhat sceptical throughout the process until I was appointed about whether someone who'd run a state boarding school in England was the obvious person to run an independent day school in Scotland. But
I'm sure that would have counted for you, actually, a variety of experience like that. So when you arrived and started working here, what were your impressions once you got your feet under the table and started looking around? Well,
I think the most striking thing is the fact that the school is so well grounded and so well rooted, both literally in this place, and is so much part of this place. And I think that gives the education that we provide a great deal of sort of weight and depth and rootedness. That we do a number of things really, really well, a lot of things really, really well. And sometimes we talk about it, and sometimes we don't quite realise what it is we do very well. That thing I mentioned earlier about being equally comfortable with aspiration and support, I think is one of those things. I think my first impression of the school was slightly tainted by the fact that in order that I should be shown around the school without exciting too much interest, I had to pretend that I was a potential parent. And so I had to create two school-aged children, or about to be school-aged children, who I was talking to people about. So I'm not a very good liar, actually. So this was, and the funny thing was that I then on my tour I met another sort of then 40-something-year-old man who I assumed was another one of the candidates. It turned out he was just a prospective parent. But I was trying to think, have I seen him somewhere before? Do I know what the circuit is? Which school is he from? if he's the enemy, then what do I need to do to beat him, sort of thing. And he was just an actual prospective parent. So I think the other thing which is striking and is one of the great qualities of the school is the fact that we're huge, and yet it really doesn't feel like a huge school.
That's true. People say it, but
it is true. Apart from standing on stage in the senior school with 1,500 people in front of you, that feels a bit big there.
Yes. So what changes have you introduced, and how have they affected the life of the school?
The theme, I think, of what I've tried to do has been to allow the school to look outwards more. And I suppose if there was a criticism of the school, it's that we are a huge presence in the city, actually a huge presence in the education of the country. When 16 and 17-year-olds were allowed to vote in Scotland, one of the figures I used at Assembly to illustrate it was that actually 0.1% of all the 16 and 17-year-olds in Scotland are in George Forces. Which is, as a pressure group, would be quite big. So that, and yet we didn't really talk about that very much. We didn't really sort of embrace, to a certain extent, the opportunity, but I also believe the responsibility that we have as a school of that significance to say, here we are. This is what we stand for. Come to us if this is the education that you see for yourselves and your children. But also, how are we affecting the debate nationally? How are we affecting the debate internationally as well about what education is for? And how can we provide that sort of charitable benefit beyond the sort of narrow sense of we educate 2,400 people, which is in itself is a fantastic thing to do. But isn't there more we should be being ambitious for? And in doing that, in being ambitious for our school and our institution, by also indicating to pupils that they should also be ambitious for themselves in all sorts of ways, and perhaps slightly different ways. And perhaps that might be going to overseas universities. It might be actually doing the IB as we do. And building on the things that we've already been done forever, like for example the Hamilton scholarship, which have been part of a sort of slightly overlooked part of our DNA. And I had the opportunity, thanks to donations, to have in a sense the equivalent for fourth years, the Don Mercer exchange. So where they can go to Australia for free, and find those things that can actually accentuate that sense of openness and ambition, which is important to everyone.
I know you didn't introduce it, but you're a great supporter of IB. How do you feel about what's happened with the IB option?
It's a great disappointment to me that we haven't yet made it sustainable. And I think there are a number of reasons for that. Some of them are intrinsic to the way in which we work, and I think we are doing better at getting information out and making some of the way in which IB deals with concepts more generally talked about in the school. Some of it is about the attitude of Scottish universities to the IB, not that they're antagonistic towards it, but they don't actually value it for what it is. They don't see it for the fantastic qualification it is. And some of it is actually that, unlike practically any other jurisdiction where the IB is present, in Scotland, where there is a single year qualification year for university, then it's always going to be a bit of a hard sell to say to pupils, well, do two. Do 6 subjects over 2 rather than 5 subjects over 1.
Because of all the schools in Scotland that offer IB, I think we were the only one that
we are the only school in the world that offers IB diploma and Scottish qualifications. We are that niche.
Very niche.
And it's a shame because there is no doubt in my mind, and I think there's plenty of evidence, certainly anecdotal evidence, that as a preparation for undergraduate study, it is just so much more appropriate and effective than any of the home schemes, be they Highers or A level or whatever. But there is that resistance.
Yes.
And but I think we shouldn't simply look at it in terms of the numbers of pupils opting to do it, although ultimately that is what it will either live or die by. But we shouldn't overlook the quality of those results. I mean, the fact that we're regularly exceeding international averages, and we're talking about this is genuinely very competitive.
Yes.
And if you're talking about pupils getting 42, 43, 44 points, we're well off the end of the bell curve. We're talking about the sort of 95th, 96th percentile of the world. So that's really, really significant. And also the benefit it's brought to other areas. So the fact that we've able to offer the CAS program, which is a fantastic element of the IB, to 100 pupils most of whom are not doing the IB as such, but it's a program that we can then enrich their experience of a 5th and 6th year with as well is a great positive.
Yeah. Now, looking forward, what are your middle and long-term aims for the school?
Well, the middle term aim, which is becoming quite a short term aim, is the
comes rushing forward.
Yes, right, is the completion of phase 1 of the campus master plan. So all the things that I wanted to get in place to sort of guide the school forward, I suppose you'd say, having a strong sense of where the site how the site should be developed over a period of time was, I thought, very important. That although it's a big site, it's actually quite a cluttered site in many ways. And so to make the most of it, we needed to have a really strong plan. And that plan had to be something which made sense from the design aspect of the site, from the educational aspect, and indeed from the commercial side of things. There's no point having a fantastic plan with no reasonable chance of being able to deliver it. Yeah. So phase 1, developing the junior school, met all those criteria. So in providing far better accommodation than we've been able to provide at the moment, not least for music in the junior school, that was important, by being able to modestly increase the role of the junior school, thus actually improving the facilities for everyone. That was very attractive. And it also seemed to me an odd thing that whilst obviously the senior school has a fantastic facade onto Collington Road, the place where most of our pupils start their lives in the school looks like, if it looks like anything, looks like a rugby stadium. Yeah. Because from my side, that's what you said. Yeah. So it needed to be something which said, "Welcome, here we are. This is where you start. This is going to be great, exciting, and it's going to be high quality and all the rest." So phase 1, starting in a junior school, I think, is along with the junior school dining room, which we'd already had built, sort of gets the junior school to a point where all those it's big enough to accommodate the pupils it's got really some absolutely first-rate accommodation, and it sort of makes that welcoming and ambitious statement about what we're about. And then phase 2, 3, 5, 10 onwards, which will say well beyond my life expectancy.
But certainly phase 2 is beginning to come into focus.
Phase 2 then comes into focus with the creative hub concept. And again, I suppose that's a bit about the physical arrangements on site, because one of the buildings that will not see out another decade is the art department. And it's also about providing the South Gilsland Road entrance with a really attractive facade. Rather than a car park and a grey line. And it's also about embracing the important changes I think are coming, or if they're not coming, then we should be pushing for, to break down these barriers between independent disciplines. Not so that they become a horrible mush of nothingness, but actually so that the disciplines can still be rigorous, but can complement each other. And so that having a building, which we hope the Creative Hub will become, which has everything from sort of very hard technology, engineering on one end, through to fine art and art appreciation on the other, and actually allow then staff and pupils to explore for themselves where on the spectrum various activities exist, rather than saying, well, no, we have to call this design, and we have to call that technology, and we have to call that art. as though these were things which were hardwired and defined somehow, when of course they're not. And then in terms of the third aspect of the campus master plan, which has to be there, the deliverability from a financial point of view, the fact that this should be seen, I think, hopefully will be seen by those who might be generous to us, as being something that Watson's has long been renowned for, but is taking it in an interesting, new and appropriately ambitious direction. And we would welcome their contributions to that.
And links with the wider community in Edinburgh. I know that you're keen to get more foundationers in, a wider mix of pupils, but I want to speak particularly about the links through the Chinese initiative and the other schools. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, as I said, one of the things I was keen to do was open the school out. And again, I talk about a spectrum in the Creative Hub, but I've really seen this as a spectrum of engagement with the wider community. At one end of that spectrum is our Foundation Places programme. So that is having enough money to reliably and in perpetuity say that if we offer you a place, we want you to be able to take that place, irrespective of your parents' ability to pay. And so part of what we're doing by setting up an endowment, in addition to the Family Foundation, will hopefully over time enable that to happen more and more. But for many young people, that won't be the most appropriate way in which we can help their education. And so I was wanting to really look at a spectrum of other things that we could get involved in and be instrumental in helping to deliver. And so I made an early call on the heads at Gillespie's and Boroughmuir and said, look, here we are, 3 schools, in each in a different way, we're all very good, schools, and we're essentially serving the same quality to the city, and actually many of the families that some children come to Watson's, others go to Boroughmuir, and so there isn't really a hard and fast barrier between the sectors. There may be in the minds of politicians, but there isn't in the minds of families, and there isn't in the minds of professionals, so why should we? And so we literally on the back of an envelope sort of said, well, okay, list of things that we might want to do together, and Chinese came up. So of course with our Chinese department, one of the biggest and largest in Scotland already, and certainly very successful in 10 or so years. I mean, it must have been in your time when that started.
Yes, it started very modestly, just with an assistant from St George's coming in once a week, not once a cycle, but once a week, and taking a group of 6 farmers.
So but building on that success, and we then had the opportunity to travel to London to make a bid for some funding from what was John Swire and Co, who were looking to celebrate the 200th anniversary of their business, the business that owns Cathay Pacific and the Coca-Cola franchise for China and goodness knows what else, and is one of, as they put it themselves, one of the most successful companies that very few people have heard of. And they were looking to fund innovative Chinese teaching projects across the UK, and we came away with a significant chunk of money from them. For the 3 schools between them to deliver that programme, with Watson's being the anchor of that, because we had the opportunity, we already had the experience, we already had a head of department in Maysbrough who was one of the leading Chinese teachers by any measure in Scotland, and we could employ the teachers in a way which the other schools couldn't. So that's what we did, and 3 years down the track, we are. This year will be well over 1,500 children in 12 schools it is now who will have benefited. By the beginning of next session, our Chinese department will be 7 teaching members of staff. And we're going from strength to strength. And I think that's provided us now with a model of what we can do. So we have to remember that none of the money for this is actually coming from Watson's. It's not I don't think it's reasonable to expect our fee-paying parents to pay, in addition to paying their taxes and paying our fees, also to somehow subsidise other educational initiatives, apart from at the margin where it's not really extra money. But the idea of employing extra teachers on that basis wouldn't be sustainable. But what we're putting in is the infrastructure and the expertise and a bit of time to make sure it works. And a bit of our sort of credibility and brand, I suppose, as well.
Yes, that comes into it too.
And the whole thing is extremely, so far, extremely successful.
Yeah. Now, I know that we're a little bit pushed for time and you've got another appointment, but just tell me briefly what you like or don't like about your job.
Well, I like the scope, and I like the fact that that this is already a fantastically successful school, and I don't have to go far to meet some really lovely people, and who have both staff and pupils, who all have their stories to tell, all have their things to offer to the community, and the fact that this is such a vibrant and diverse community in its own way, and there are always good things happening, is great. And I think the exciting thing is about how that can be taken forward and made even better, and how the impact that we have on the lives of the young people here as a school, and as I've explained, the life of the city, if you like, the broader life of the city and the country, can be commensurate with the size and importance of the school.
And anything you don't like?
Oh well, there's always.
I mean, I know.
There's always there are days when
you never have enough time to get.
There are never enough time to do the things I want to do, and I never have enough time to sort of relax into things. I'm afraid there's always the next, and there are always days where there are days in the week you think, is this really why I'm was appointed to do this job? No, I mean the balance is overwhelmingly positive.
Of course,
and what I haven't actually mentioned, I should have done in your presence, is of course what has been absolutely outstanding has been the support from the Watsonian community.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've been tremendously receptive and welcoming of me and of Catherine,
and you to them. I think you know the feeling that the Watsonian community is valued by you. That comes across.
Well, and I think it's because that's what I mean really by the opening up of the school, and it's actually the opening up of the whole community, and the sense of engagement with the school by that community, and the importance that the community has for the school is one of the remarkable features of the success of the school, I'm sure, over many years.
And the last question, more trivial really in a way, do you feel that when you're in Edinburgh you're a bit of a prisoner? You can't go out to Waitrose, or
I do go
if you go to the cinema and you get, Mr. Roffe.
Yeah, I do go to Waitrose.
Other times, say during the holidays and so on, where you can completely switch off from school. And what do you enjoy doing?
Well, I mean, it is the case that I sort of have. It's difficult to do that in the city, it's and you know, in most ways it's great. You know, don't get me wrong. But I suppose, I mean, it is a lot easier to switch off out of the city.
Yes.
And we're lucky that we have a house 500 miles away. Where we can,
500 miles.
500 miles. There's a song about that. Although there was an occasion when I must have been looking particularly scruffy in the middle of a holiday, and dishevelled and unkempt in the garden.
Down in Cornwall.
And a 4x4 went by, and I couldn't help but notice that it had a Scottish number plate and an Edinburgh dealer's sticker on the back. And I thought, the Holy Cottage down the road. There's a fairly good chance that this is going to be. So Catherine was dispatched down the lane to make polite conversation with them. At which point, as she came back, all clear, they're Loretto barons.
Oh, thank heavens! Yes.
At which point we affected to hardly have heard of Edinburgh, and there's no possible connection.
Good. Leading this double existence. Yes.
No, but it is a bit of a goldfish bar. I'd call it. I wouldn't call it a prison. I think if it's a prison, it's a very lovely prison.
Yes.
And it certainly has its compensations. I wouldn't complain about that.
Good. Well, thank you very much for that.
Great
And maybe another interview in 5 years' time to see what the long-term aims have become.
Whether
and so on.
long-term aims have become short.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much
Thank
indeed,
you, Roffe.
Principal. Thank you.